Hi, I'm ML Matt Buchman, and I'm here with 5 insider factoids based on questions from my fans and readers. Let's talk about Nightwatch, Miranda Chase number 12. Warning, this video includes spoilers. Let's jump in. So the E4B Nightwatch is a very interesting plane. It's also a very old plane. It's 50 years old. Um, it's a 747. There are four of them, actually, but they all do the same task. But they've gotten so old that they've actually are using them less and less, even though they kind of need them more and more. So they're finally looking at replacing them, but that's about a 5 year process. So these planes will be 55 by the time their replacements come in, if they come in on schedule. Now, what they are is they're airborne command posts. They're kind of like Air Force One, that they're designed for the Secretary of Defense or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the president or vice president to be aboard. But and they're both 747s, but that's kind of where the divide occurs. Instead of having luxury suites and a medical center and um, places for the press and places for the Secret Service, it has an immense amount of electronics and about 40 technicians to service those electronics. And from that plane, they can literally organize and command a war. They can trail out a 5 mile long antenna, maybe it's 5 kilometers, out the back of the plane that lets them talk to submarines that are deep submerged, which takes a very long radio wave, which means a very big antenna. They can talk to satellites. They can talk to cell phones. They still have all the old technologies too. They've got fax. They've got teletype. They've got everything there that's needed to communicate and the commanders to do it. And the purpose of these planes is really to go up and get lost, to not be found in case of a nuclear war or something. They're hardened, so even if a nuke goes off relatively close, the magnetic pulse won't destroy the plane. And they've tested that, not with nukes, but with a special rig that does a big magnetic pulse. And the other interesting thing about the plane, I'll come up with it, I thought of it a second ago, is that uh, command post, I've lost it. Okay, I'm back. I finally got my brain to catch up. The other interesting thing about the plane is whenever the president flies out of the country, there's a night watch within an hour. So there's always a night watch somewhere near where the president is when he's out of the country. It used to be also when he's in the country, but the planes were so old that they're trying to preserve their lifespan. But whenever he's out of the country, this is his escape plane. Yes, if they can get him to Air Force One, they get him in the air. But the E4B Nightwatch is the one that really is the backup in case there's a major attack or something. The other question I got about the plane was why weren't the civilians offloaded before Nightwatch and the plane went sub hunting right near the end, hunting for a submarine? And the reason was it's actually the best tool they had around to do that. Sitting in a conference room in Thule, Greenland, they wouldn't have had access to the kind of communications and the research, and they're trying to understand what has happened. There's far superior communications aboard this plane to anything else they could find on the ground, short of maybe the Situation Room in the White House or Cheyenne Mountain for the Strategic Air Command. So staying on the plane actually helps them get information to analyze and answer the chairman of the Joint Chiefs question of what the hell is going on. So that's the reason that they stayed on the E4B Nightwatch. Another question I get about this book is I did a lot of breaking up of the team. Taz and Jeremy have left to form a new team, and the reason for that was Jeremy had gotten so much better and so much more skilled that he kind of filled the role that Miranda was. He was becoming duplicative. And so it's time to find him a new job. Plus, writing about a team of 6 people all at once, 3 of whom were couples, it there wasn't enough dynamics. So I spun them off to a new team. They still interact with Miranda's team. And maybe someday Jeremy will get his own book or his own story or become the lead. I don't know. He hasn't done it yet, but I wouldn't put it past him. But that's the 2 reasons I broke them off. The reason I wrote Mike and Holly out of this book was again that simplification, encapsulation. I wanted to increase the pressure on Andy and Miranda, especially Andy. We're putting Andy in a real vice here. She doesn't get along with her mother. She's being forced into close proximity with her mother in an area that her mother has expertise. So her mother's looking really good and it's really annoying. And she can't really turn to Miranda for help because it's about emotion. So we're building pressure on Andy that we're going to see explode in the next book. So that's the 2 reasons that I did that. Also for variety, I knew that in a near future book, which turned out to be 2 down the road in Griffin, as I record this, Griffin has been written, Mike and Holly take a major role and Miranda and Andy take a minor role. So I, I, I'm trying to keep the excitement alive in the series. So Andy and her mom, one of the things you may notice about my writing, it doesn't have a lot of parents in it. Um, my parents and I had interesting relationships, and we'll just leave it at that. So for me to take Andy and her mom and put them together and force them together was a real exploration of a healing process. How could Andy get past the past and find a way to heal with her mother? And that was a big theme for me. And that actually was one of the hardest parts of this book for me to write, was to find a way to make that transition believable, but she's not going to just flip a switch and change over. Andy's going to have to come to terms with a lot of things. The other interesting one was Rose and Clarissa, and they're forming and unforming a kind of mutual support unit. So they're becoming a family, but in a found family way rather than an actual family way. And so that's another contrast I wanted to look at. I wanted to and we see that also in Andy and Miranda as they're trying to discover, are they found family or not? And that'll be more answered in the next book. But it's taking apart family and looking at family and how people come together and come apart was a lot of the theme of this book for me. Now, the northern passages, this is sort of the plot section of the summary. Um, the Northwest Passage, they spent a couple 100 years with sailing ships and then powered ships trying to find the shortcut route for the spice trade from Europe to China. And they kept trying to go through the Americas. That's where Columbus came across, was trying to find a route across. Well, once they discovered that North and South America was this huge block, they found Tierra del Fuego, but for that they had to go way south and come way back north. So what if we could just go across the top? And so they kept trying to find passages, but it was cold enough that was always frozen out. And Northwest is very Eurocentric for both of these passages. From Europe to the Northwest would take them over to China across the top of Canada and Alaska. The Northeast Passage was even tougher. There were fewer islands or fewer ice blocks, but it was pretty much a big sheet of ice back in those days. And there was um, It's a single great expanse with pretty much nothing up there. And it also ended up traveling farther north. They had to, so that passage was pretty well not explored. I mean, people would nudge against it, but they knew that much past Finland and the White Sea at the top of Russia in the middle of summer, you weren't going to get any further east. So these two passages that were explored and explored and explored with global warming have now opened up. And we're seeing Chinese ships designed to travel the Northeast Passage from China to Europe over the top of Russia. And we're starting to see ships designed to travel the Europe or East Coast America over to China. And what this does, among other things, is it takes away income from the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal, which were the two shortcuts to get to skip going all the way around Africa or all the way around South America. Therefore, I hypothesized, what if the two of them got together and said, hey, we got to find a way to scare people off these passages? And that became the plot of the book. And the last thing I want to talk about from this book that I got a lot of questions on is, why did I burn Spiden Island? Miranda is up in the air looking down at her home. She has her girlfriend and the girlfriend's mother on board the plane, and she comes upon a forest fire. And the forest fire is a lightning strike on her island, and it wipes out half her island and destroys her home and the airplane hangar and the plane of her youth. And the reason I went there with this book was, um, Miranda's been very safe in many ways. She's, after the first book or two, she became comfortable with the existing team. She managed to add Taz and Andy. People on the autistic spectrum hate change. Change is very disturbing because they have to reset their world paradigm and perception each time something changes. So it's her comfort zone. She's taking them to her comfort zone. And there's an old adage among writers is, keep the pressure on your character. Keep pushing them. Keep squeezing them to see what comes out. And what came out was that cycle of events that happen on the flight and Miranda's near collapse and what it took to coax her back. And it really showed the challenges she faces, but also what she is capable of, to her own surprise, perhaps, where she kind of comes back in and she starts typing even before she figures out how to speak again because she's rebuilding. You can see her rebuild her world and her world reference after that fire. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to throw a lot of change at her and watch her rebuild those structures. And also the memories that she carries. And we see a little bit of that as they're looking at the house and trying to decide what to do with the house after it's burned at the very last scene, and I think the bonus story. Um, she's working with her memories of the past and of who she is and how she was and how her family was, and trying to find a new beginning, trying to find a new way to think of these things. And I lost a house to being laid off and not being able to afford it at a bad time. But so I took that experience into this. But we've all experienced hard loss. How do we go about moving forward? How do we go about rebuilding that next step and moving ahead and letting go? And that's the thing I really wanted to look at with Miranda. And so that's what the fire was about. Well, that's my summary of Nightwatch. Please visit my website. There's more about my books, how to contact me if you have other questions. There's bonus scenes, bonus stories, recipes from the book, maps. So go and play, and thanks for watching.